What's up my subscribers and unsubscribers, and welcome back to another unit review. Today we'll be looking at Might Rekon Korps and its true form, Orbital Annihilator Ragnarok. Before the video starts, I'd like to ask if you could please subscribe if you enjoy these review videos, as they take quite a lot of time for me to make. Also, I do a community poll before I make each of these videos, so you can vote for what units you want me to look at before I make my videos, and if you're subscribed, you'll never miss your chance to vote. Anyways, let's talk about the Uber now. Might Rekon Korps is an uber rare you can get by rolling the Iron Legion Gacha banner. I'll review his first form as well as his true form, but do be aware they are extremely similar, so everything I say about his first form will also apply to his true form. So Might Rekon has the stats shown, and yes, his first and evolved form do have the same stats, so which one you can use is completely up to your preference. I think his first form looks funnier, so I use that one. We can see from his stat spread that Korps has extremely high damage, topping off at 75,000 to pop, as well as 10,500 DPS, and coming from 450 range, these stats are really high and make you wonder if there's a catch with this guy, and there are two really big ones actually. The first catch is that Korps can only attack traded enemies. This means that in any stage where traitless enemies are the main threat, like in Empire of Cats Korea for example, Korps is completely incapable of attacking and is thus rendered useless. Even if he attacks a crowd of traded and traitless enemies, his attacks only deal damage to the traded enemies. So this renders him nigh useless in a lot of important stages like the Crazed and Manic Cat stages, Monthly Advent Awakening stages, and a bunch of other ones. And the second catch is his Force Wing. Korps takes nearly 4.5 seconds to initiate his attack, and that's a little bit longer than pre-True Form Bahamut, and you know how much pre-True Form Bahamut loves to miss his attacks, and the same sadly applies to Might Rekon Korps. They even share the same range. And honestly, you can think of Korps as a pre-True Form Bahamut, but with no time in between attacks and the target traded restriction. With these two crippling weaknesses, let's see if his true form fixes any of his issues. It appears not. Korps' true form, Ragnarok, is strikingly similar. The only changes he receives are plus 14,000 damage, plus 20 range, and Omnistrike that allows him to hit up to 470 range behind him. And you might be wondering what this backwards hitting Omnistrike is for. It's because I forgot to mention that Ragnarok also has Z-Killer. His first form, second form, and third form all have it, but it's now much more useful in true form due to this newly acquired Omnistrike, and it means that Ragnarok can now hit any zombies that burrow and resurface behind him. He's actually a pretty good anti-zombie too. With his 8 knockback counts, he's easily able to reposition when any zombies manage to get a hit on him, and that 88,400 damage and 12,400 DPS are nothing to scoff at. So, with this Z-Killer and Omnistrike, it appears that Ragnarok is geared towards being an anti-zombie. And while yes, he is really good against zombies, his true purpose is to be a generalist. And while you may be confused by this, considering he can't even attack traitless enemies, let's remember the whole reason he can't attack traitless enemies is as a limiter. He'd be too overpowered if he could. I mean, just look at my man's DPS. It's almost triple that of pre-True Form Bahamuts. So imagine 3 Bahamuts in one unit, but for the same cost. So this is some really great value. And in trait heavy stages, he excels at dishing out the damage. So long as the main boss of a stage isn't traitless, he'll be pulling his weight and then some. Let's now address the pros and cons of Ragnarok. Ragnarok has the pros of high damage and DPS, 8 knockback counts, good range, good anti-zombie abilities, and rapid attacks, meaning he never stops attacking. He's either trying to attack or he's in his backswing animation. All of these factors combined are what make Ragnarok an extremely powerful and hard-hitting Uber, with lots of usage against all traded enemies, and this means he finds a lot of usage in Stories of Legends, and can be used in trait-heavy areas like Heavenly Tower, all of the traded citadels, and most of the zombie outbreak stages, as well as Into the Future and Cats of the Cosmos stages. Ragnarok isn't perfect though, as he has the downsides of long force swing, long, almost 3-minute cooldown, he cannot hurt traitless, and he cannot attack when cursed, and that's something I failed to mention earlier. So the reason Ragnarok can't attack traitless enemies is due to his target only ability, right? So target only means he can only attack traded. While Ragnarok is cursed, he literally can't attack anyone because his target only ability is what lets him attack. So without his target only ability, he targets nobody. And I know that's really stupid. You would imagine cursed would let him hit traitless, but this is the sad truth that Ragnarok just, when relics creep up on him and he gets hit, he just turns into a blubbering baby. He just stands there staring at them. It's really sad to see, honestly. This doesn't mean he can't be used in stages with relics, it just means you have to be really careful. If the relics outrange him, or have too much pushing power, Ragnarok will constantly be getting hit and knocked back and being left cursed and unable to attack. Overall, his cons are what really drag him down from his otherwise overpowered design and downward back to earth, relegating him to only be used in trait-heavy stages, as well as stages where relics aren't too much of a problem. And with these pros and cons in mind, his tier rankings are as follows. In early game, I had to give Ragnarok a B+. Before True Form, Ragnarok has really similar stats to his True Form still, and those stats are amazing, as we've already said. So he does extremely well against all of the Empire of Cats Moon stages, as well as the majority of the Into the Future stages, and Empire of Cats Zombie Outbreak stages. Of course, there are a lot of Empire of Cats stages and earlier Stories of Legend stages where traitless enemies are the majority, so he can't be used in a lot of these stages. And of course, the hardest early game stages are the Crazed Cat stages, which he's also useless in, sadly, so that's what keeps him from an A ranking at this portion of the game. Once you hit mid-game though, I promoted Ragnarok to an A-, and during mid-game you're dealing with many tough traitless stages like the Mana Cats, the Special Cat Awakening stages, as well as the monthly Advent Cat Awakening stages. These are all very important stages that Ragnarok is more or less useless in, because most of the bosses of these stages are traitless. However, he is really good in almost all of the Stories of Legend stages, and is especially helpful in the Zombie Outbreaks and Into the Future, as well as most of the Cats of the Cosmos stages. The reason he's promoted to an A- here, despite there being even more hard traitless stages now, is because there's also way more hard traded stages, which gives him overall increased usage at this point in the game. Moving on to late game though, I had to demote Ragnarok to a B ranking. His power comes in handy when you do the 2 and 3 star SOL stages, and cleaning up any new traded stages you may come across, but sadly his usage is heavily hindered due to Uncanny Legends having relics, which completely sideline Ragnarok with their curse ability. So while he can be used against relics, it's a very risky game you play, and you have to make sure your defenses are good enough to keep Ragnarok from being hit at all, which makes him feel more like a Nekaluga than an Iron Legion. Also, once again, Ragnarok is useless in most of the Advent stages, for example Rashomon and Relic Queen B. He can't do anything. So while he's a really good generalist Uber, he has no special qualities other than Z-Killer and his high damage stat. And this is the kind of Uber that excels in early and mid game, but just really falls off in late game due to a lack of specialist qualities. Like I said, big damage, big DPS, but you know, he's not very fast. He's not especially good at one thing in particular. He just, again, good damage is his only thing he has going for him. The one thing I always use him for in late game though is my Growing Strange loadout. With his Z-Killer, 8 knockback counts, and 470 range, I find him incredible at being able to kill my most hated enemy, which is Cadaver Bear, and really taking care of the business against most zombies in general. So while he's pretty mediocre in late game, as an anti-zombie specialist I had to give him an A ranking. Not many zombie killers can boast having such high range and so many knockback counts, and the Omnistrike is a nice feature too. The only reason he didn't get an S ranking here is because of his 3-minute cooldown, which is a bit too long for my liking, as when you're fighting zombies, it's not very unusual for your Ubers to die quickly due to their burrowing ability, allowing them to be constantly burrowing into Ragnarok or just whatever unit you have, and beating the crap out of them. So that's why he's stuck at an A here, but it's still pretty good, and he's one of the most solid anti-zombie Ubers in the game. With that all said and done, that wraps up today's Uber review. If you've watched this far, thank you very much, and I appreciate your viewership. This guy, he reminds me of the olden days. I did a tier list recently, actually. That was my previous video, and I was thinking about the old BCEN tier lists, and how this guy would have been like A or S, because they just value those generals, but man, he's just, I don't know. He's like an Uber that gets burnout, because he's just so, his stats are just, he's designed to be a good generalist, but all these kind of generalist Ubers, at late game, they just, the generalists become useless, because you need specialists in late game, because all the stages just become really specific with what Ubers would be helpful, so yeah. This guy experiences major late game burnout, just like a lot of the good Ubers like Shishalan and stuff. I think that wraps up this video. I'm gonna stop rambling now, and goodbye.